Heights, Groton Height, and into the fort. British under Benedict Arnold, with his commanders, Lieutenant Colonel Edmund Eyre, Major William Montgomery, and another Captain George Beckwith, who comes into the story in a bit. They are leading the 38th, the 40th, the 54th Regiments of Foot, Loyal American Regiment, Arnold's American Legion, and German Jaegers. Several hundred men. Colonel Ledyard has about 175 here in the fort. He's badly outnumbered, but they're going to put up a fight, and that's what we're going to see. This is also punishment in their minds to New London for the many, many mercantile raids and seizures of ships, most recently the Hannah, bound for New York with goods and black powder worth an estimate 80,000 pounds sterling. That was real money in those days. So Fort Trumbull has fallen. The British forces have landed on the Groton side and are coming up here. Now there are several myths I'd like to try to abolish if we can. One of them is that the British were kind of stupid, that they only knew how to march in straight lines and get shot at. If they had, how did the war go on for 6 and 7 years? You don't build an empire like theirs by being stupid. So these are professional soldiers, they know very well what they're doing, and Arnold is an aggressive commander. That's what he's known for. It promises to be a bloody, bloody fight. Unfortunately for the Americans, they are a bit undermanned for the size of the fort. It probably would take several hundred men to properly defend this, stationing men inside as well as outside the fort. And they really don't have the manpower to do that, but they're going to try. Colonel Eyre and Montgomery land in Groton. They advance on the fort. Captain Beckwith is sent forward to the fort under a flag of truce, and we'll be seeing that. He twice demands surrender of the fort, and Arnold threatens them with no quarter should they resist. The answer comes back twice: nuts. We do not surrender. Yes, that's a different war, yes. All right, so we should be seeing some British soldiers showing up in a bit. I'll shut up for a few minutes. Are there any questions?
The British are coming up behind you.
You're not a history teacher.
They're behind you.
I was. Oh, really?
See the red coat there? Way back? Way back there?
Yep.
What happens if we shoot him anyway?
They either take the surrender or they're trying to parlay and talk about terms of the surrender.
Or maybe they're telling them to. So why is he wearing a white flag? It's not a white flag, it's the top of the shirt. I know he's surrendering, but why is he surrendering? No, it's parliament. He wants to talk. He's like, give it to me and I won't kill you. Oh God, what's that? He's like, let's see.
Okay.
painted like red.
They better hope they don't get run over the side of the ship. They can hear them saying.
British dead. There were 50 British dead that had to be buried. Most of them were buried right around this little earthwork right here, including 2 British officers that died that are still buried on the inside of that little earthwork there. So the British had a lot of work to do that they were not expecting to do. They expected this to be a fairly quick action with a relatively undefended fort. Of course, the fort was actually far more well defended than they realized, costing bloody casualties on both sides, excessive bloody casualties on both sides, including a lot of surrendering Connecticut troops that were killed in the chaos of the battle. But again, many British troops, 200 British casualties total. That's more than all the defenders of the fort itself. 50 of those British casualties died in the battle and were buried here. Another 150 were transported back. Many of those proceeded to succumb to their injuries as well and were mortally wounded and died after the fact. Many of them being thrown overboard from the British ships going back to New York City. So it was an incredibly bloody day, incredibly devastating, costly day that the British were simply not expecting. So we're here portraying the last of the troops that are now evacuating the fort. Most of the rest of the troops, of the 800 troops that had been here, again, 50 of them were killed outright, 150 were wounded to one extent or another, many of them mortally. Some of them were left behind because they simply couldn't be transported. Many were carried to ships. We're now waiting for the last of the walking wounded to come up. Do we have them up?
All troops are accounted for.
Where are the walking wounded?
The walking wounded, according to the surgeon, simply said that they were to stay where they are again.
All right. So we're keeping some of the walking wounded here. We're leaving behind. The rest of us are going to now embark down to the ships below. Not a very good day for the British Army. Absolutely not a very good day for New London and Groton. But thank you all very much for coming. Anyone have any questions before we march off? Yes.
So I missed. Unfortunately, I missed yesterday's.
That's all right.
Narrative. So originally the ships were down at the mouth and then came up.
Very good question. So originally, the British, the Navy, the Royal Navy dropped off the British forces at the far end, down near Avery Point. The British Army marched up to 3 miles up. The Navy was planning on picking them up again there, but the Army managed to, which is a rare case of Army and Navy agreeing on things. The Army managed to talk the Navy into bringing their ships up here. Partly a tidal current situation as well, which made it a lot easier for the very chewed up British Army to be able to just evacuate with their, again, they had somewhere between 30 to 70 prisoners with them, depending on accounts, and again, 150 wounded. So for a force of overall 800 troops to have one quarter of them either dead or wounded, that's dramatically changes the dynamics of a British Army evacuating a battlefield, leaving a battlefield. Anyone else have any other questions? Yes?
Why did they throw?
So that's a good question. So the young lad asked, why did the British throw the dead people off the ship? Unfortunately, in this time where there wasn't refrigeration, there wasn't a good way to care for grievously injured. It wasn't actually a good way to care for wounded, but to care for the dead, especially in a time where death was a far more common daily experience for people in the 18th century. There was no way to keep the dead on the ship in any way that didn't jeopardize the health of the other people on the ship. So sadly, basically they gave them what we call a burial at sea. They just threw them overboard. Anyone else have any other good questions?
Any questions then?